darling. Hi, guys. I'm really happy to be here. I do have to share with you that for the last several weeks I've had this throat thing, not contagious, but I might get a little raspy, so bear with me. I gotta tell you that I did this story 10 years ago, and I'm blown away that it's been 10 years and I'm doing it again. The name of the story is Pushy Broad, and you will soon know why. Okay. Time waits for no man or woman. There's less of it than you think. Several years ago, I had 5 heart surgeries. I know you wouldn't know it by looking at me, but I did. Don't worry, this is not a heart surgery survivor story. It's about AIDS in the late 80s, way funnier. One event in my past that I noted when I was feeling gratitude for still being alive happened in 1987. We're into the 80s a lot here tonight, you know? When I was living in Berkeley, California. Now I know, to look at me, you would never believe that I lived in Berkeley! But I did. I had just left a big job directing mental health programs for children and adolescents. I left because my boss was an asshole, acting very badly, asking women if they had gotten laid the night before and how big their boyfriends' dicks were. The fuck? Anyway, my daughter was going to graduate high school the following June and go on to college, I hoped, and I needed to move back east for medical reasons. I decided to stay in Berkeley until my kid graduated. I had lots of time on my hands. It's not good for me to have time on my hands. I get bored and I get antsy. I saw that the AIDS Project of the East Bay in Oakland was looking for people to volunteer a day or 2 a week. So I called and offered my time. You know, I'm a psychotherapist, I'm an addiction specialist, I'm a life coach. Oh, I do so much. Also, I had directed a center on death and dying at Yale and could be available to help people cope with grief and loss. Yale. Yale? I wasn't sure that you heard that the first time, so I thought I would make sure you heard it again. Come on, like you wouldn't repeat it? Anyway, where was it? Okay. In 1987, we had very little knowledge about this virus and the psychological impact of the AIDS diagnosis. I had to go through an intensive 3-day training before I began working with any of the clients. The training began with a panel composed of 3 guys, all diagnosed with HIV. Each told their story to a group of about 100 of us. We were all volunteers. The stories were really difficult to hear. You could feel the sadness permeate the auditorium. There was an enormous amount of sympathy and empathy and an outpouring of support and kindness. But then Richard spoke. Richard was really angry. He proclaimed that he was not gay, as most of the guys in the program were. He was better than that. He insisted and was proud that he had contracted the disease by sleeping with prostitutes. The more he spoke, the angrier he became. He felt sure that once he made it clear that he did not wave a rainbow flag and he never hooked up with gay men, people would realize he did not deserve this disease like the homos did. Well, the training ended. Several days later, I received a call from Diane, the clinical director, with the name of my first client, and I was psyched, and it was Richard! So like a professional and truly compassionate woman, I, of course, said, no! No! Absolutely not! I told Diane that he was rude, angry, and a sexist pig. Well, she didn't disagree, but she went on to say, please, Michelle, he really needs a strong woman. Well, I'm not immune to flattery. If you call me strong, I'm going to stop and think about it. So I took a breath, I paused, and I said, no, no, no. I feel like I'm talking to my cat. No! Okay. But here was the catch. I had volunteered my services to see any client that they referred, and it was going to be shitty of me to refuse the first client that had been referred to me. So I stopped and I took another fucking breath. I said, okay, I'll agree to see him only in order to determine if we can work together, nothing more. I wasn't going to commit to someone if every time he opened his damn mouth I wanted to put duct tape on his lips. When I told Diane I would see him, little did I know that he refused to see me because he said I was a pushy broad. And he didn't like pushy people. Loudmouth Richard, who was claiming superiority over gays by proudly announcing his love for hookers, said I was too pushy? What? Oh, come on. Anyway, the director then informed me that Richard had been involved with some incidents of domestic violence as well. Terrific! What the fuck am I getting myself into? When can I start? Fuck. Okay. I called him and we made arrangements to meet for lunch in a few days. When I walked into the restaurant, I saw that he was dressed in a suit and tie, and when he saw me, he stood up and pulled out my chair for me. The gay-bashing John with anger issues and dislike for pushy people pulled out my chair for me. Now take note of how much that matters. Guys, I'm truly a feminist with contradictions. He was calm and kind. I was open and compassionate. And something fucking lovely happened. We forgot our prejudice and we were able to connect. We continued to meet a few times a week throughout that year. The few months that I had planned to volunteer stretched into 10. We spoke every day. When he needed a laugh, he called me. When his estranged wife came to his house, he called me, and I told him to leave immediately, because if he started fighting, when the police called me, I wasn't going to bail him out. Get the fuck out of that house now, I said to him. He said, okay. When he went for his treatment, which in those days meant up to a week in the hospital, he called me. Every day, sometimes several times a day. In those days, AIDS was a death sentence, and guys all around me were dying. But Richard kept going. The hooker-loving Energizer bunny with some rage in his heart. On one occasion, when the clinical director was running a group that Richie was in, she called to tell me that everyone was complaining about their therapists, except Richard, who said that everybody needed a therapist like Michelle, who calls you a dickhead when you're acting like one. Diane recalled that Richard was smiling like a Cheshire cat and said, the best thing that happened to me was having a therapist like Michelle, who got me to look inside and deal with my feelings. When Christmas came, I received a card from Richard, which said, to a pushy broad from a sexist pig. We decided to share our concerns with each other. In it, he wrote that he was determined to live through 1988 because of the work we had done together. He was determined to have more time. Several months later, in June, he and I said goodbye. He left for Arizona, I left for the East Coast. He continued to call me every Sunday. As the days went on, he became weaker and weaker. He had become really ill. One Sunday morning, his voice was so weak that I could hardly hear him. He told me that he was really tired and he didn't want to hold on anymore. I told him that if he wanted to, he could let go. He thanked me and we said goodbye. That was the last time we ever spoke. Excuse me, this is hard. His girlfriend called a few days later to tell me that he had died, and that before he passed, he asked her to make sure to call me and thank me for the work that we had done together. And you know what, guys? A week later, I changed my license plate to Pushy Broad. And I dedicated it to Richard. Yes, Richard. A man who reminded me how precious time is. How there is only this minute, and it's as good or as bad, as difficult or as compassionate as you decide to make it. It doesn't matter how much time you have. It's what you do with it. Be kind, be compassionate, and always be a pushy broad for love.
Aww.